Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they are and were created. And that's Revelation chapter 4, verse 11. Well, good morning, and welcome to another Bible study from Ferry Baptist Church. I am your pastor, Raymond Steinkamp, and I'm going to try to make this brief video, and I do apologize. It's a little late for our Wednesday night Bible study. We're getting ready to move, so it's just been working late to try to get things ready here at my dad's house. But nevertheless, I do have a few announcements, or at least, a few announcements this morning. Do want to remind everyone that this coming Sunday will be July the 12th, I believe it is. We will not be holding morning service at the church because so many people are going to be out of town that it would be kind of a waste of our resources for just 3-4 people to show up. So we're going to do things online again this Sunday, but as far as we know, the following Sunday we will be resuming our normal morning worship time. Also, do want to remind everyone that we have canceled homecoming due to the COVID virus. Contacted several people, and most of them said they would not be coming, because we'd had people traveling from out of town, upstate down here, and just didn't want to risk the lives of the people for the COVID virus. I do hate that we had to cancel, but there's just no way around it right now, just for the safety's sake. And I do want to remind everyone that we normally have our morning services at 11 a.m. each Sunday, and hopefully for too long, maybe we can get started back on our Wednesday night services. But we've been trying to hold off just a little bit because of the rise in the COVID virus cases that we have seen here in Georgia. So just want to let you know that, and I think that's all I have for the announcements, other than my wife did get the diapers to the pregnancy center here in Monroe County, and I do encourage you to support our Monroe County Pregnancy Center because they are pro-life and they do offer the abstinence-based sex education program in our high school and middle school as well, which is a wonderful thing for our community. So we do want to support them and do all that we can, and just want to address a few things that we've got to talk about that's going on in the country today. We normally like to say in the world today, but it's actually in our own nation today and in cities near around us. As I've told people for decades, here where we live in a very rural area, we're very insulated a lot of times from a lot of the things that go on, even in our own nation. But now we see it creeping in and getting closer and closer. Sooner or later, we're going to be affected by things. And we see a lot of things going on, especially in Atlanta as well as other parts of the country where the Black Lives Matter and the Occupy things that they have done, and we see the violence that comes out of all of that. There was a man, I think, in Chicago that was gunned down in front of his own daughter on the streets and died there. We had an 8-year-old girl who was shot in a car that was driving by near the Wendy's there in Atlanta that was burned down, and it's kind of obvious those black lives didn't matter because you don't hear the great protests. Where's all the protesting and the rioting over this? Why is it that no one's speaking out much against this other than the fact that it doesn't fit a narrative that they want to promote, that America is wicked, that America is the problem? I don't think it's America, and we don't have the systemic racism that they say that we have. We have a violence problem, and it's sad when 12% of the population commits over 50% of the crimes, and yet they want to say everyone else is the problem. I think we need to wise up here and see that we have cultural problems. We have family problems. We have problems where we see the breakdown of the family, and Black Lives Matter is all for doing away with the Judeo-Christian family construct there, where you have a mother and a father both there. You see, there's a lot of evil that goes on to this, and as I mentioned to you Sunday morning, most of this just boils back down to money. That's all it boils back down to is money. How can I get free stuff? I hear people all the time want to talk about, well, I'm going to get paid now. I'm going to get free stuff. It's the taking from the haves that they say don't deserve to have it because they must have got it illegally in some way. You put 10 people in a room there, and if everybody's got $1 except for one person, they've got $100. Well, that guy that's got $100 must have took it from the other 9 people in the room. It's just a foolish way of looking at things, but that's their viewpoint on things. And they say the haves don't deserve to have, and they need to redistribute that wealth back to the so-called have-nots. But the problem is, in our nation, there's not so many that have-nots. I mean, you have homeless people, and we do have poverty in some areas, but it's not like third world countries. Even some of our homeless people live better than some of the people in third world countries. And I'm not saying it's okay to be homeless and we don't need to worry about them, but what I am saying is we live in one of the greatest nations of the world. We are the richest nation of the world, and even people that are considered poor here are not so poor. I mean, you take the protesters and the rioters and the looters, they say, well, it's because I've been held back by the system. I don't have, but yet they have $1,000 cell phone. Yet they've got $300 shoes on. Yet they're wearing $500 pair of pants. But they don't have anything. It's just ridiculous. And all of them going back to home, some of them that the government is paying for, eating food that the government is paying for, while they receive a check from the government. But yet they're so poor. Yet they're having to do without so much. I mean, I think we need a reality check here in this world. But I don't want to just harp on that and just stay on that, because there's a lot of negativity there. What I do want to think about is what should be the Christian's perspective of this, because I see signs all around that says faith over fear, and I agree with that. We should trust in God. But what is it that we should be trusting in God for? What is it that we should know about God? We read back in Isaiah that God He determines the ends of the beginnings and the ends, and He makes all things come to pass. And nothing happens that God is unaware of and that the God did not ordain. That doesn't mean that God caused it. God didn't put His finger on someone and say, go murder this person. He just removes His grace and allows them to do what's in their wicked hearts to begin with. But I want us to keep in mind here about God and what God is doing. Even what we read there in Revelation chapter 4. And we're going to probably do a Bible study on this, maybe even Sunday if I have time to get preparation for it. But you can read the events that take place there in Revelation chapter 4 as you enter into the throne room of God. You find references in there back to Isaiah, and you find also references back to Daniel in this, but also you find a lot of it back in Ezekiel. A lot of what comes from the book of the Revelation goes back to Ezekiel, and we have to keep in mind what's taking place in Ezekiel. We see the judgment of a rebellious house, a judgment of Israel and Judah, and we see God judging them for their wickedness and rebellion, and a foreign nation coming in, taking over, and taking them captive and taking them to a foreign country. In this, we just see the destruction of the city, Jerusalem. We see the destruction of the temple. And it is all a picture of what's going to happen at the second destruction of it there that happens in AD 70. See, I believe the book of the Revelation is not for something future to us. It's mostly past to us. It is taking place there. It's the end of a covenant. God basically divorcing His harlot wife, Israel, that's mentioned over and over throughout the Bible. That we see that Him divorcing her and taking another bride for His Son, Jesus Christ, which is the church. It is the ending of one covenant and the beginning of another covenant. It's the ending of the Judaic age there and the beginning of the church age, or the kingdom age is what we ought to be calling it. And I wanted to make it a habit to be calling it, because I do believe that we're in the kingdom age now. We're going to just look at that as we go through the book of the Revelation, but we're in that kingdom age, and I believe the Lord Jesus is reigning, just like we read there in 1 Corinthians 15:24, where We're told that he must reign until he's placed all enemies under his feet. He has to reign, and the last enemy is going to be death. So the last enemy has not been put under his feet just yet. So we see that Christ is reigning. And in that, we've got to ask ourselves, if Christ is reigning, then what is going on? Because the reason I wanted to mention Ezekiel in this and the horrific times that many of the Jews lived through, and that time period there, and the violence that they saw and the evil that they saw and the judgment that came upon them were all ordained by God for their sin and their wickedness. But it was a much worse time than what it is now. You've got a lot of people, even Christians, running around out here saying, oh, it's so bad, it's the end of the world. No, it's not. And yes, things are bad, but they're nowhere near as bad as things have been in previous times of the world. And it is challenging times, but how are we as Christians to react about this? Because I wanted to do this study through the book of the Revelation because I wanted to deal with what happens when we have bad eschatology. And some of you out there that are dispensational, if you catch this video, I want you to listen carefully, because bad eschatology basically leads to some bad theology, which leads them to some bad living. And the bad living that I am talking about here is what we find going on in America. And dispensationalism has done a lot of damage here in America because it has silenced the church. You know, you hear people talk about it in political realms, and I actually have seen it for years and years, decades really, in the church. And it's called this silent majority. You know, the silent majority. We'll go to the polls and we'll take care of it there, and it's going to be this silent majority there. And I want us to realize something about this silent majority. It's getting us in a lot of trouble, both theologically as well as politically, and we need to quit being so silent about it. We need to quit being silenced here about what is right and what is wrong, about our Christian faith. You see, what this dispensational idea is things are going to get so bad that the church is going to be ultimately basically destroyed. Decimated is the word I'm trying to look for in this, but then it's just going to be completely defeated, and then it's going to be raptured up out of here, whatever's left of it. And then 7 years later, Jesus is going to come back after hell on earth, and he's going to set things right. He's going to set up his kingdom, and then everything is going to be perfect. Well, that's not biblical. That's not what the Bible teaches us here. The Bible teaches us something different. When Jesus gave his great commission there in Matthew chapter 28, he says, go, therefore, go. All power in heaven and earth has been given to me. He says, go and make disciples there of the nations. Go and teach them to observe whatsoever I have taught you. He says, baptize them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. You see, we're supposed to be active. We're supposed to have a voice in this. We're supposed to be out here telling others not only about Jesus, but about the law of God and the holiness of God, all these things. And we're not supposed to be the silent majority here. And in Christianity, we have been too silent for too long, and we have been told for too many decades that we have no business in politics, that there's this separation of the church and state. And there is. They're two separate entities, and the church is not to dictate for the state is not to dictate what the church and how the church worships, as they are now, because they're being told in California, hey, you can't sing. You're not to sing during the worship hour there. You might spread the virus and things along those lines. But I want you to realize the state is invading into the church now. We better wake up, because if things go bad, there's no longer going to be churches like we see churches today. They're no longer going to be these big buildings. There's no longer going to be big, profitable corporations and all. We're going back to house churches, and we're going to have to meet in secret. We're going to meet in private. We're going to have to risk our livelihoods and even our freedom to worship God. We better wake up and quit being so silent about things, and be out here and start being proactive about things. And but instead of waiting on Jesus to set things straight, we ourselves need to go out here and do what we've been called to do. If we brought the law of God out here to this dark world, maybe we see things a little different. Maybe if we went and told Black Lives Matter that all lives matter, and that the Bible says, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not kill. That's a commandment from God that you're going to give an account for one day. Not only that thou shalt not kill, but that we're made in the image of God. All of us, all so-called races. There's only one race, and that's the human race. There's just different skin colors in it, but on the inside, we're all basically the same. And we need to get a grasp on this, that we've been made in the image of God, and we're accountable to reflect God to others. We're not to hate anybody because of their skin color. Now, we can dislike people because of their mindset, and because of how they live their lives, and the sin that they just endorse and commit in their lives. And we're to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with them, and that's the only true hope for us. And as I told you Sunday, I get the fact that Jesus is all we need. I get the fact that it's going to take God to fix this, but it's going to take God using people. That's how God has ordained it to be. He's not only ordained the ends, but the means to reach that end. And the part of the means to reach that end is that you and I go out here and proclaim the gospel. You and I risk life and limb to save people out here, to share that gospel with them, that they might come to a saving knowledge of Jesus. And we may be very fortunate in this, that God is merciful, and He restores this nation. Maybe that He doesn't. Where are you going to find yourself standing, though, on this? Are you going to be standing with Jesus, or are you going to be standing with everyone else? You see, when these mega churches fold, and when there's no longer these big buildings to go to, and big manners of entertainment, and all this self-help stuff has gone away, and all these big money preachers have gone on to other things to make big money, and maybe even got themselves involved into the communist government and things like this. What about you? What about you? See, that's when we're going to see the real Christianity flourish there. When we're going to see that those that are true followers of Jesus continue to follow Jesus. You see, God has always had Himself a remnant. He always keeps a people there for Himself to represent Him. And you see, this is the challenge to Christianity today. Every generation has had its challenges. The church has been forced to take and define what they believe, and heretics are exposed, and the faithful are shining forth, and that's what we're going to see in all of this as well. Those that are in the true church, those that are true believers, those that will be faithful to the end, those that will give their life for what they believe, because they have been redeemed, they have been regenerated, they have been changed, they've been justified by God, and they can only do what it is that God has placed in their hearts, and that's to serve Him and to follow Him in all things. And that's what we're going to see flourish out of this. And I guarantee you, what you're going to see is men and women of faith having to rise up and speak out and take the abuse, take even incarceration, and maybe even death before it's over with, to show forth the righteousness and the truth of God. And yes, as we look at Psalm 9, verse 11, it says, the wicked shall be turned into hell, and every nation that forgets God. And as I told you, I want you to remember, it's not that they forget God, that they knew Him and forgot God. They forget that they have to stand and give an account before God about what they do with what He gives them. You see, we are having to give an account now of the blessings that God has given us, and yet we've chosen to be this silent majority. We've chosen to bury our heads in the sand. We've chosen to sit on the sidelines and say, oh, we'll just go to the polls and vote. We'll just wait on Jesus to come back and straighten everything out. You've got to wise up, Christian. That's not how it's going to work. He's given it to us. He's given us the strength, the wisdom, His Spirit. We're not to sit silently by. We're to go out here and proclaim things. I risk my very job by putting things on YouTube like this because someone sees it and all they've got to do is complain, and say you said something they didn't like. What was it? The couple, I can't remember if they were in California or where, but because they painted over the Black Lives temporary mural there, all of a sudden they're charged with a hate crime. You see how this works and how this operates here, and you're going to have to risk it to get the truth out here. I'm not saying go out here and do anything violent. I'm not saying be racist in any way. What I'm saying is we need to be truthful and we need to be honest about things. Just like I keep saying, 12% of the population commits over 50% of the crimes, and they worried about so-called police brutality. Hey, let me tell you something. What about the brutality we see towards one another? What about the brutality of murdering someone's father right there in front of their little child? What about the brutality of bullets hitting an 8-year-old child riding in the back of a car and it kills her? What about your brutality today? How brutal that you are to your own people. That's what we need to wise up and speak the truth out about. That is evil. That is wickedness. That is the brutality. You see, it's just like the police will tell you, don't fight with the police and you won't die. If you want to fight the police, go to the courtroom and fight the police. That's where you fight them, in the courtroom with a lawyer doing it legally. I don't have pity for anybody that fights the cop. If you fight them, then you get what you deserve on that. I'm not saying they had the right to kill you, but I am saying you get what you deserve on that. But I said I was going to keep this short, and it doesn't look like I've kept it very short. But I do encourage you to take time to think things through, to listen to what people are saying. Don't listen to just every narrative that you hear, and use a little logic and use a little wisdom. Look through what people are saying. All this is a push us towards socialism that's going to end up in communism. It's a push to really destroy this nation. And why destroy this nation? We have our flaws, and yes, we fought to correct them. And I just want to add this in there about correcting these things. Yes, there's been racism in America. We act as if there wasn't a war fought over it, and there was. We act as if there are not laws made against it, but there are. But it's the song that we sang Sunday morning in church, America the Beautiful. One of the stanzas in it says, God mend her every flaw. And that's the thing. It's going to be imperfect, and we want to fight to correct these things. But just to throw it all away and try to supposedly start all over again is absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. Especially with us being the greatest nation, the most powerful nation, the richest nation. Why would we want to change it? I mean, like I said earlier, even those that are considered in poverty in our nation live better than most people of the entire world. Most people, especially in third world countries, these have-nots in our nation have $1,000 TVs. They have $1,000 cell phones. They have a couple $100 pair of shoes. They have clothing that they wear that's worth hundreds of dollars, yet they have not. That's not a truth in all of this. The truth in all of this is we all live pretty good. Unless we're homeless on the street, we're all living pretty good. So this narrative that we hear about the inequities there and all, this is the nation where a man can start out in poverty and wind up a millionaire in one lifetime, sometimes 2 and 3 times in one lifetime. So this is the nation where we looked and said anybody could be president. Anybody could be president. If you're born in America and you meet the requirements, anybody could be a president of the United States. I mean, this is where dreams come true. And we need to keep this in mind with all these idiots that are out here saying we need to destroy and this systematically racist. It's not systematically racist. If you've not done what it takes to be successful, and I've known people who were of the persuasion of everybody's against me, the system is rigged, it's all, I can't have what I want. But when they got out and started earning a living and they started having a family to be responsible for and children to pay for and bills and Their whole perspective changed there. And as one commentator said, when you move out of your mom and daddy's basement and start paying your own bills and living for yourself and depending on yourself, your whole mindset changes there. It becomes very different in all of this. Well, I hope this makes some sense, because it was kind of thrown together, a lot of different ideas in this, but I just encourage you to pray for this nation, to pray for one another. Know that we need Jesus in our lives. We need to be born again, and that God does love us, but we've got to quit being this silent majority and start doing what God has called us to do. We can't sit in our churches and hide anymore. We can't sit in our homes and hide anymore. We can't even trust going to the polls anymore just to vote there. We have got to verbalize this truth, and we've got to be wise enough to be able to do it in a way that is consistent and logical. Because the other side, I'm telling you, is not consistent and not logical. They're just willing to get out there and voice it. Well, may God bless you until we meet again.